Hey everybody, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. Thank you for watching, and on this episode we are going to kind of take a slight detour from the Sammy Hagar deep dives. This is a Sammy Hagar episode. We last did Cosmic Universal Fashion, so it's 5-year gap before there's another just Sammy album. He's got the 2 Chicken Foot albums, so I thought we would do something to fill up the space, if you like, in the middle. And it occurred to me that I've got, I think, all of Sammy's albums that came out on cassette. So I thought I'd do an episode about those. And as I've said many, many times, and as I say in my Sammy Hagar book, Red on Black, his early Capitol catalog was really hard to find in all formats. And since I started buying cassettes, it was primarily cassettes I was looking for, but I would have bought whatever format, right? You know, even if I'd found one of his CDs and didn't yet have a CD player, I'd have bought it, you know, in the hopes that someday I'd have one, which obviously happened. Anyway, first couple ones of these are sealed. Now, I don't know if these were factory sealed or if they were resealed by whoever sold them, but they're in good shape. 1976, 9 out of 10 scale. This is a US cassette. A lot of these ones are. So yeah, there you go. And where that's got a barcode on it and the number marks that as a reissue. And this came from a place called Retro Specialist. These CDs, cassettes, are 30, 40 years old. Covers may not be in pristine condition. As a brand new reissue, please allow for the age. That's kind of cool. Anyway, that's where the song titles are written. So that's the first one. And that's also where I got the second album from 1977. Self-titled, usually called the Red Album when referred to at all. And it's also a reissue, because the original version wouldn't have had the barcode on it. And it came from the exact same place, same sticker on the back from Retro Specialist. Next up, we have another album from 1977, and this one's not sealed, Musical Chairs. This too is a Capitol reissue. It actually says that right there underneath the song titles. And there's nothing inside the J card. This is what the cassette looks like, which is typical of old US Capitol cassettes. One of the first actual albums I found from Sammy that wasn't a truck stop tape, and I'll get to that if you haven't read the book. And this isn't the actual tape that I used to have, but All Night Long, Sammy's first live album, just a single live album, like a single record. And this is actually an original Capitol version. It's not a reissue. You can tell because it doesn't have a barcode on it, and it's got a different serial number. And because of that live there, some people call this album Live All Night Long, but I think live is just an indicator. It's a live album. You don't call Kiss Alive Live Alive, or, you know, Live Cheap Trick at Budokan. Anyway, and that's what the tape looks like. Look the same. And this album was reissued, or was issued in the UK, but not at the same time it was in North America. And it was issued under a different name with a different cover. So this is a UK cassette of Loud and Clear. And this is essentially the All Night Long album with the addition of Space Station Number 5 at the end. Love this. Love the red cassette. I don't know if this was typical for Capitol or they just did this because it was Sammy. I don't know, but I like it. Case, for that matter. Maybe somebody out there knows. And there's not much in it for credits, but there is songwriting credits, which is more than I've seen in any of these cassettes so far. And these, you know, like I said, these cassettes, these albums, period, were very hard to find before the advent of the internet and being able to shop online for them, especially in my area of Eastern Canada. In Canada in general, Sammy didn't sell a lot of albums, especially in the early part of his career. So it was particularly cool when I found this cassette, because this is a Canadian version of Street Machine from 1979. So you can tell quite a different look to the cassette than the US counterpart would be. Of course, there's nothing in the J card. The cassettes didn't look all that different from Canada as they did in the US, other than the address of the label. Sammy's final album for Capitol Records came out in 1980. This is sealed, but it doesn't say where it's from. Danger Zone. And this is an original. It's got a barcode, but it is an original. I can tell because of the serial number. And yeah, all those Capitol tapes kind of look the same. Then, of course, as we know, Sammy switches from Capitol to Geffen and gains more success than he'd ever had. And the first album is dated 1981, but as we know, it actually didn't come out till January 6, 1982. Standing Hampton on Geffen Records. This is a Canadian version of that album. And this is actually quite a later edition of it because the cassette has Geffen as distributed by MCA Records as opposed to by Warner Brothers. So that change happened between 90 and 91. And originally, this cassette came with a kind of a bizarre, I'm calling it a bizarre packaging. So originally it came out like that, like you'd normally see, but it had the back cover completely wrap around, and then you had this on the other side, almost like a cassette single. And wherever I bought this from, they cut it, or maybe it was perforated, and put it inside the cassette, which I guess kind of works. But yeah, it was a really different one, and what's even more strange about it is that it's not the only one of his albums that Geffen did this with. So Capitol, of course, retaliates after Standing Hampton became a success, and they put a best of out. Not a truck stop tape, though. It's a legitimate one. It's called Rematch, 1982. And this is a Capitol reissue. Because if this wasn't a reissue, it would look like this. It would have the black and white on it and not the red and white. So this probably was reissued about a couple years later, around 1984. That's just a guess, and it says it's a reissue on it too. This was one of the easier things to find in the earliest days that wasn't a truck stop tape, but it is a compilation. But it did have some songs on it that I hadn't heard at the time. I think this is the first time, I'm positive this is the first time I ever heard This Planet's on Fire, was on Rematch. Next up is my personal favorite of all the Sammy solo albums. I've said that many times, 3-Lock Box. This is a US cassette on Geffen. Yeah, love this album. Cassette's a little, writing on the cassette's a little faded, and there's a little bit of credits. They're all kind of mushed together. There's a little bit of credits. And once again, Capitol Records responds with some older material reissued. This is Sammy Hagar, live, 1980, recorded at the Hammersmith Odeon. I would like to hear the complete performance of this, because obviously they would have recorded it all. I'd like to hear it. And this is a Canadian cassette, very distinct Canadian Capitol, the black and yellow look. And you don't see very many of these. I think I've seen a copy of Rematch that looks like this, but again, you don't see many of the old Sammy Hagar cassettes from Canada. They were made, you just don't see them. And let's see, there's the back cover. Well, back of the J card. Nothing inside the cassette, and that's what the cassette looked like, which is typical of Capitol cassettes in Canada for the bigger part of the 80s, with that digitized, like looking 1 and 2. Next, we have an album that in my book I counted right along with the rest of Sammy's albums. And I actually didn't find this until 1993, and this is the very cassette that I found, and I was excited because I'd never heard any of it. The Hagar, Sean, Aronson, Shreve album, Through the Fire on Geffen Records, and you can, if you look where the Geffen logo is, you'll see a hole. So this was a deleted album, a punch through. So it's a US cassette of that. There's the tape itself, a little bit of credits, a few pictures, and basically not much more was on the record itself or the eventual CD. So, and Sammy's biggest solo album, 1984 VOA. I made a mistake on one of my previous episodes. I said it was the White House. It's the Capitol building. I apologize to my American friends. And so this is a Canadian copy. It's a super cassette. Talked about those on a previous episode. Very different than what the US cassette would look like. There's the cassette itself. And basically there's nothing in it that, there's nothing missing from this than from the vinyl and CD, except I think there's one picture of the band where it looks like they're asleep in an office. But all the credits that came with the original album are in here. And then of course, Sammy joins Van Halen, and you know he has to do one more album for Geffen. And this is, I mentioned Standing Hampton had a bizarre packaging. This one is intact. So originally it was just self-titled. It's now known as I Never Said Goodbye for various reasons. And it's got this strange fold out, right? So it goes beyond the cassette, and it would have been all like, you know, packaged like this when it came out. There's the tape itself. And so, yeah, you get this on one side, then you get another photo of Sammy on the other. And, but the actual record and the 8-track and the CD, the front cover looks like that picture that's on the side. But the CD long box that it would have come in originally is that. And that's also a sticker that was included with the original album. Anyway, yeah, a little bit different on the packaging. And this is something that Geffen was doing at the time. If you've ever seen, there's most copies you'll see of Aerosmith's Permanent Vacation. There's a picture of them in jail here, so that must have been something they were doing right around this time in 1987. So, work this back together. The next thing I want to talk about is the last remaining thing that I have from what I call truck stop tapes. And truck stop tapes are something that I devoted an entire chapter in my Sammy Hagar book. This section here. So these were record company issued cassettes. Sometimes there's vinyl, sometimes there eventually were CDs, but these were really cheaply made and cheaply priced cassettes that would sit, I call them truck stop tapes because you'd see them a lot at places like that, restaurants that would have a few things sitting next to the cash register, variety stores. Stores that didn't have music sections even would carry these kind of things back in the 80s. The very first thing that I ever bought by Sammy Hagar as a solo artist, I was already into Van Halen, was I found a cassette that was cheap enough that I could afford it. And even though I didn't really know any songs on it, I bought it anyway simply because it was Sammy Hagar, and this is it. It's called Red Hot. So the SM there stands for Capital Special Market. So that's the, I guess, the direct to stores. Like regular music stores tended not to carry these. These were the domain of, I don't know, cheapy bins or dump bins or whatever you might call it. I could still remember spotting that, like it kind of jumped on me. I was, oh, does that say Sammy Hagar? It's only $3.99. I can afford that. So this is what started my Sammy Hagar collection as a solo artist. This tape right here, and right away when I bought it, I realized it was live. So half of the songs on here, some of the songs here come from All Night Long, and the other songs come from Live 1980. This has a copyright date of 1987 on it, but it also says 1978 and 1983, which are the years of those previous live albums. I liked it. I liked Red. You know, it's the first time I heard Bad Motor Scooter or Space Station Number 5. I had no idea about Montrose at this point, but this was an important step because I realized that Sammy had a lot more albums than just the albums that you saw the most were the 4 Geffen albums. So Standing Hampton, 3 Lock Box, VOA, and the 1987 album. You didn't see the HSAS one, even though that was on Geffen too. So yeah, I've held on to it because it's special to me that way, you know. And that picture is just from the inside of the All Night Long record. So the next thing I have that came out from Sammy, well, he didn't put it out. Capitol put it out again, but this one is another semi-legitimate release. I think the artwork on it is pretty bad, but it came out in 1992. It's just called The Best of Sammy Hagar, which is misleading because if you buy something called The Best of Sammy Hagar and you're not a huge fan, you'll probably think this has I Can't Drive 55 and Eagles Fly and Your Love Is Driving Me Crazy and There's Only One Way to Rock. None of that stuff's on here. This is all Capitol stuff. Really don't like the artwork on this at all. Don't like the use of colors. There's no red on this. Like, I don't know how this was supposed to stand out for people. And this is a US BMG Direct version, so it's a record club version. The original retail cassette would have just been a clear cassette. And it's got very sparse liner notes written in here, which aren't all accurate. But, you know, what made this appealing and why I bought it in the first place was because I was buying CDs at this point pretty much when things first came out by 1992, 93. And this was the first time a lot of these songs I had on CD because I didn't have the original album. So I guess it served a purpose. Now, a really good best of, and the last thing I have here that's on Geffen, 1994, Sammy Hagar Unboxed. This is a true best of from his Geffen career. And this actually went gold eventually. There's the cassette. And like the CD, it's just got these photos, and then it's got songwriting credits, where the album, the songs originally came from, and just a little bit of thank yous and stuff. And so, of course, 1997 is the next Sammy album. He's out of Van Halen, and he puts out one of his best. It's probably my second favorite after Three Lock Box. Marching to Mars. By now, cassettes are getting less common. This is a US cassette on MCA. You see all this red, you immediately, yeah, that looks like a Sammy Hagar album. This cassette looks about the same, and it's got much the same as the CD does. But it's one of those J cards that it's got one correct way of folding up, and that's it. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Some of these are really bad in later years. The next one's surprising because I found this at, shout out to my friend Marty in Moncton when he had Livewire. I actually found this at his store, a Canadian version of 1999's Red Voodoo, which is also on MCA. He just did the tube for MCA. So that's what the cassette looks like. And folds out. Pretty much it's got everything that the CD's got in it. And I say CD because I think in most of these cases here there is no vinyl unless it gets reissued, which I kind of hope it does. And then finally, to my knowledge, the last Sammy Hagar album that came out on a cassette was 2000's 1013. Great, great, great album. And this is a US cassette on Beyond, which was distributed by BMG. Yeah, that's what the cassette looks like there. And again, I think it's got everything that the CD would have, just, smaller, obviously, because of the format. And yeah, as far as I know, that's it. Unless, unless there's some reissues happen, I don't know. It could always happen. Am I missing anything? And I know there's there's Cruisin' and Booze, and there's Turn Up the Music, there's different truck stop tapes. Other than that, I don't think I'm missing anything. I know that in the early 80s, Warner Brothers put out a bunch of cassettes that had two albums in one. There'd be an album on each side. And I know there's one that has Standing Hampton on one side and Three Lock Box on the other. I'm okay without that. So there you go. That's my Sammy Hagar cassette collection. Not the easiest thing to complete, but fun, making it happen. And if you're a fan and you still haven't picked this up, available through Amazon, I will have the link posted below. I want to thank everyone so much who have supported this and all of my books. All of my books are available through Amazon as well. But yeah, this goes through every single one of the Sammy Hagar albums, and we are going to be resuming the Sammy Hagar deep dive in just about a week's time. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and thank you very much for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions. Please hit subscribe on your way out, and we'll talk to you later.